As long as you are convinced you have never done anything, you can never do anything. Malcolm X. Welcome to the We Don't Believe You podcast series. Our mission is to neutralize and dispel the false narratives, negative images, and disparaging stereotypes that have been perpetuated about Black people through various media outlets for centuries. Each week, we will highlight stories of Black excellence, greatness, and success of the past, present, and future, all of which share one common trait. They chose not to believe the negative images or stereotypes that said they couldn't succeed, but instead achieved massive success in spite of them. And now, here's your host, Brian McCoy.
Peace, and welcome to another episode of the We Don't Believe You podcast series, where our mission is to dispel and reverse the false negative narratives and the negative stereotypes that have been perpetuated against Black people in America for centuries. How we do this is by highlighting and shining a light on positive Black images of individuals who chose not to believe those negative stereotypes and images, but instead chose to succeed in spite of them. Our next guest is a shining example of this. After many years of life happening and courses changing, she obtained her bachelor's degree in art and graphic design from Meredith College in Raleigh, North Carolina. She went on to obtain a master's degree in library science from North Carolina Central University, which is a historically Black college and university, or HBCU, in Durham, North Carolina. She currently serves as the library manager and the librarian of the Wake County Public Libraries in Wake County, North Carolina. She's the chair of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee of the Wake County Public Libraries. And she's focused on and committed to increasing the Black and brown presence in the field of library science. Please welcome our own guardian of knowledge, Miss Valerie Pierce. How you doing today?
Hello. I'm doing well.
Good.
It's good to be here with you.
Thank you, and it's great to have you. As always, just in general, just really good to see you. Really good to see you smiling.
Same here.
So first and foremost, welcome, and thank you for stopping by, and thank you for your time and energy today. You have a pretty amazing story, and obviously there's so many questions. So I guess the best place to begin is in the beginning. Where were you? Where were you born and raised?
I was born in Jersey City, New Jersey, born to a single mother. I am the middle child of five, four brothers and sisters. I have two ahead of me and two below me. But spent probably 8 years in Jersey and then moved to North Carolina. So we moved to Wilmington, North Carolina when I was about 8 years old. So I grew up in Wilmington. In the Wilmington area. So I had those two influences. So growing up in, being born and spending my early years in the city environment of Jersey City, New Jersey. I remember my mom used to tell us stories about how it was hard for her to find a place to live. And she used to have to take what she could actually afford and what landlords would allow her to move in with kids. And she used to have to stay up late. And sometimes she didn't get any sleep because we had rats, roaches, and she used to have to make sure she stayed up so that the rats wouldn't bother us while we were sleeping. So it was really rough during those beginning years. But once we decided to pick up and move back down south with her mother and the rest of her family, things kind of changed from there.
What do you think was what was behind the change? Just a different location, like just a different region of the country? What?
I think she wanted to give us a different environment to grow up in. This is the area that she grew up in down south in Wilmington. And that was her home. So she wanted to give that to her kids. I think she wanted to kind of get us out of that environment that was in Jersey and decided to bring us back home.
Okay. So you spent your formative years was spent in Wilmington, in North Carolina.
Yep. From the third grade until I graduated high school and went on to college. So yes. So that's where I grew up. That's where I kind of got molded as a person during those times.
Interesting. So what do you think molded you? So in other words, I guess tell us about your childhood.
I think I had a really cool childhood. Like I said, it wasn't easy because, single mom, she had to provide for us. And at the time, it was just four of us during that span of time for me, being in the third grade to going into high school. And having to work and making sure that we had a roof over our head and had food to eat and clothes on our back. So she sacrificed a lot, but we were, always a close knit family. My uncles, my aunts, they put their arms around us and kind of raised us all at the same time together. So it was really cool. It was really fun. I became really close with all my first cousins. So we all kind of grew up together, really as brothers and sisters. So I've had that influence of having a really large family. Because my father wasn't in the picture, I don't think we missed out on anything when it came to family, because my mother's family has always been very large and very close. So, we had fun during our childhood years.
So did you see kind of like your mother take on the mother and father role in your life, or did you ever feel that the father role was missing and that affected you somehow?
I don't. I just don't think it affected me. Maybe I don't know it affected me, but I don't think I missed out on anything, because she did, she was the disciplinarian, plus she was the one that gave us our hugs and so she took care of us the way we needed to be taken care of. And I think if we look back, all of her children are successful. And so she did an excellent job.
Beautiful. So do you think that, so it's the family structure, you think that she kind of leaned on that and that was able to help? Like, do you think everyone just leaned on each other for the support and that helped?
Yes. I would say that we all leaned on each other. And because she got all of that from her mother, who got it from her mother. So we had strong generations of women in our family that took care of each other. So yes, it was where she was able to lean on the family around her, and we were able to lean on them.
So the concept of Black women's success wasn't anything that was new to you. You grew up immersed in seeing Black women achieve and strive and succeed.
Yes, correct. It may not have been financial success, but it was more of making sure that your family is taken care of, that type of success, and that we had those things that maybe not what we wanted, but what we needed,
and probably some of what you wanted.
Yeah.
So that's actually beautiful. That's a beautiful testament to, number one, Black women, number two, the Black family, and the importance of each.
I agree. Yes, definitely.
So when you moved to North Carolina, would you say you were at that point middle class in terms of income or wealth? Would you say you grew up rich, middle class, poor?
Poor, I think. I mean, we grew up under the poverty line. That's what it was. But I wouldn't say that I really knew what being wealthy was. I felt that we got enough that we needed. So we never went hungry. Our lights didn't go out. So I didn't see us as being poor, but when I look at it, yeah, we were poor, but we survived, and we were able to thrive from it also.
Yeah. So it sounds like the kind of love and support can substitute for money. Money is not the end all and be all, so long as there's love and support.
It's nice to have, because it makes things a little bit easier, but it's not the end all be all. So there's a lot of people that have money, but they're very, very, very dysfunctional. They are sad, and they're not happy. So money does not bring you happiness. It may make things a little bit easier as life goes on, but in the end, to be able to have love, to be able to have that comfort, and knowing that you have people here to support you, to love you, to care for you, that's really what matters.
Okay. And again, just a beautiful testament. So what was Wilmington like for you from your perspective? Take everybody to Wilmington, North Carolina during the time when you grew up. So tell everyone, make everyone feel what you felt.
Wilmington is a very there's a lot of layers to Wilmington, especially during the time when I was growing up. If you understand and you know the history of Wilmington, North Carolina, you'll probably understand more how it was when I was growing up. So if you look back in history books, especially go back to the late 1800s. So 1800s, in the 1890s, Wilmington was a thriving port city. The racial dynamic in Wilmington, there was a lot of Black leadership in Wilmington. We had a Black newspaper. We had Black elected officials. I think the sheriff was Black. So there was a lot of Black power in the Wilmington area. So if we fast forward to 1898, this is a time in Wilmington where there was a catalyst that happened, where there was the first and only coup that happened here in the United States, where the government was taken over, and the Black people in Wilmington were kind of ran out of Wilmington, and it was taken over by white Democratic control. And from that point on, Wilmington became very segregated. The Jim Crow laws really kind of started with what happened in Wilmington in 1898. So if you fast forward to the 1970s, there was still that feeling of white supremacy and white dominance in Wilmington. So the classes were separated. And I can actually think back to a time when we were in high school where there was what we called, especially during the time we spent in high school, where we had little race wars and race fights with the Black kids and the white kids in the school. Wilmington became desegregated, I think, in the late 1960s, early 1970s. So there were still some remnants of that happening in the 1970s and 1980s, and I graduated in 1984. So we were separated in a way, but there was still some bright spots when it came to race relationships. But it was something that, if we think about the main park that a lot of people went to, Hugh McCray Park, and it was supposedly named after a Klansman that was famous in that city. So and from what I heard, I had stories where there used to be Klan rallies and so forth in this park.
Right in Wilmington?
Yeah. Yes. There's recently been a push to rename that park, and I think they did rename it maybe last year. But again, that's the climate that we were in, and how the history of Wilmington kind of lends itself to what's happening there today, and during the time when I was kind of growing up and going to school there. And we can actually take this back to me going to the library for the first time in Wilmington, and how the impression that made on me during that visit. So my first visit to the library by myself, because again, my mom, single mom, she didn't really have time to take us to the library on a regular basis. So when it got to the point where I was able to catch the bus to the main library downtown in Wilmington, go in, I was ready to go get my library card. And once I got to the desk, where the librarian was. She greeted me with such disdain and coldness and was like, "What do you want?" And from then, at that point, I just said nothing and walked out. I have never been back into that library again, but I think that put a thought in the back of my mind is that this is a place where eventually, and it's so funny, it came full circle where now I make sure that everybody that comes into that space feels welcome because mainly of what happened to me when I was a youngster during that time.
That was an incredibly powerful story. So do you feel like in your heart of hearts that was racially motivated?
Somewhat during that time. And I've done a little research on the libraries in Wilmington, and I know it took them probably until the late 1980s, early 1990s before they even had a Black librarian to work in their library. So I know that they weren't really used to having served the Black community during that time also. So seeing a young Black young lady come into the library to be served was something that they weren't really particularly fond of.
So that's interesting. So actually incredibly interesting. So I'm wondering in your mind how much of that played into your decision to become a librarian.
It was so funny because it didn't really hit me until after I spent time in the library when that memory came back to me. It was probably once I went to college and I had a work study assignment. And this was my first really introduction into being into a library space behind the scenes and understanding what it kind of meant to work in a library and be a librarian. And that's when that memory actually came to me. It was during the time I spent 2.5, almost 3 years going to St. Augustine's College. During that time is now St. Augustine's University. And my work study assignment was to work in the library. And I had the opportunity to work with a reference librarian, the first Black librarian I had ever seen. And then we had other Black librarians that worked in the circulation department. And that kind of opened my eyes up to who could actually be librarians.
So that image, just seeing a Black librarian, just knowing she existed, opened up that realm of possibility in your mind.
Oh, yes. Oh, it blew it wide open. Yes. And especially once you have that individual kind of talking to you and letting you know that this is a possibility for you. I became very, very interested and intrigued in the profession during that time. So what I did was, after me, getting married, having children, and kind of getting into the workforce, I applied for a position at a public library here in Wake County, and was able to spend probably the next 10 years understanding and really knowing what it felt like to be or become a librarian. So that took me on the path of, going back to school, earning finishing my undergrad degree, and then going into library school and getting my MLS, which is my master's in library science. So
take us back really quickly. You said you graduated high school. It was high school you graduated from in 84, right?
Correct.
All right.
New Hanover High School, 1984.
So talk really quickly, talk about you're going to St. Augustine College. Was in your household, was college one of those things where you're going and like it's like the 13th grade, or was it a decision of yours, I want to go to college?
kind of a little bit of both. Like I spoke before and kind of let you know that we had a huge family and a huge family dynamic. And my uncles, they were very prevalent in my life. So I have one uncle who was very, very adamant about us going to college. So he made sure that my sister went to college. My other two cousins that were older than I was went to college, and so it was expected that I was going to go to college also. And that's the path that I chose.
So how did you choose St. Augustine or St.
And
Augustine?
my sister is a alumni of St. Augustine's, so I kind of followed in her footsteps. She graduated St. Augustine's in 84, and I became a freshman in 84.
All right. So you get to St. Augustine's, you're in Raleigh now, and you're basically an adult. How did the experience work out for you? How did it go?
Well, and this happens to a lot of young kids when they first go to college. I was kind of all over the place, didn't really know which direction I wanted to go in. So, of course, being a librarian was nothing that I thought about during that time. My focus, I thought, was to be an architect. So I'm a really, in my opinion, a good artist, and I wanted to kind of have that translate into a profession. But with that, looking at the next couple of years, I kind of jumped and went to a couple of different majors. I first started with architecture, then I went to computer science, and then I went to commercial arts. So I wasn't really focused on what I really wanted to do, and it showed. So before I was able to graduate, I actually left school, and then at that particular time, I met who I thought was my true love. We got married. We had 3 beautiful children. And probably in 2000 is when I realized I needed to kind of apply myself and finish my degree and go back to school. So by that time, I was 35 years old. I had 2 kids, and I was actually separated from my husband. So that was a total life change for me. I knew I had to focus on finishing that degree. And then because I spent those years working in the library as a library assistant, I knew I wanted to become a librarian. I had a great mentor in my library manager, and she persuaded me that, hey, this is where you need to be. This is you. And from there, I went for it. So I kind of fast tracked myself where I had to make sure that my children were taken care of, but I took a position where I worked in the evening, took classes during the day. I probably got maybe 3 hours of sleep, but I finished both degrees. And at that point, I was ready to go. I was a librarian.
Beautiful story. So let me ask you this. When you left college, because when I went to college, I left college too and didn't finish. When you left, did you have a feeling of, I have no clue what I'm going to do next? Or did you kind of have an idea? Or what were your thoughts when you decided to leave college?
Well, when I left, my thoughts was to be a wife and a mother. That was my main thing. So I spent probably 7 years just being a stay-at-home mom and raising my kids during that time. 7-8 years. When my youngest was in kindergarten is when I actually started working again. So those years were just me being a wife and a mother and taking care of my family. That was pretty much it. I wasn't at that point thinking career-wise. It was more so making sure that they were taken care of.
Okay, so you're married and then you have your children, and so your marriage And so does your marriage end before you decided to go back to get your bachelor's, or?
I decided before the marriage ended, but once I actually started school, the marriage we were separated. So it kind of all happened within that same 6 months time period.
So did you have any like fear or trepidation of going back to school as a older student?
No, not really, because I was focused at that time. There was a great program that Meredith College had for older students. They called it the Wings program, and it was for people that had previously gone to college, didn't finish. So what they allowed you to do was actually transfer your credits from the college that you went to. So you didn't start off like as a freshman. So I came in as a junior, which was great. So I got 2 years under my belt already. So all I have to do is finish these last 2 years. So it was a lot easier to deal with than actually starting fresh as a freshman with no credits. So all I had to do was kind of focus on what my major was and take care of those classes. And, that I wasn't looking to party or hang out or any of those things that I did when I was going to St. Augustine's. Now it was all about finishing my coursework, getting my degree, and then moving on to the next step.
So what you just said is like one of the reasons why. So I ended up getting my bachelor's degree at I think I was 42 or 43. But what you just said is really powerful, because I think a lot of people do have that fear of trepidation of going back to school.
Right.
And I actually think like what you just said, like your focus and your interests are totally different when you go back as an adult. I'm not interested in going to nobody's party. I got kids, man.
Exactly. Yeah, I wasn't looking to make new friends, even though I did actually meet some really, really cool people. Because there was that program, there was a mix of, we had a lot of younger students, and I actually found that some of them kind of looked up to a lot of the older students. So in certain classes, in certain environments, we actually kind of became those leaders in those classes for those group assignments and things of that nature. I did some really cool stuff while I was there. I was on the yearbook board where we actually created and edited and designed the yearbook. So that was great. My senior year, I did that. We had a bunch of art exhibits and art shows where I was able to kind of get some good placings in some of those jury exhibitions. So the experience was great, but it was just totally different as far as my focus on what I needed to do in order to get to that next step.
So that is truly, truly inspirational, the fact that you did that, and congratulations on that alone. So I hate to put you on the spot, but I have to. Right now, give a piece of advice to a single mother that is going back and forth in her mind about going to college.
Go, because the longer you wait, the longer it'll take. And that's my advice. If you feel that this is what you want to do, and you have a plan to making sure, you have your time mapped out, you can take care of your kids the way they need to be taken care of, and that you can actually perform well in school, go for it. Don't wait, because the longer you wait, it's just gonna take longer, and it's probably going to even be harder. So as soon as you get the inkling to do it, and I know it's never going to be easy, because it's not, especially if you have support from your family. If you have that family support and you have somebody in your corner willing to help you, go ahead and make that decision to go.
Excellent advice. So I and everyone listening, thank you for it. So your bachelor's degree is in art and graphic design.
Yes.
So tell everybody or answer the natural question everybody has: where does librarian come from after pursuing a degree in art and graphic design?
Well, it's so crazy that the end game was always to be a librarian. When I knew I was going back to school, I knew that the bachelor's degree was finishing. That was first, and I can't do that. I can't become a librarian without finishing my undergrad degree. That's first, and then going to receive my MLS was the end game. So with my bachelor's degree in art and graphic design, I just leaned on what I was doing when I was in college before, and then what I was doing that came natural to me. Being an artist is something that I've really enjoyed. I wanted to make sure when I went to school, I did something that I was already focused by then, and I was going to do something that I would enjoy. It wouldn't be something that I would get bored with, and it'd be something that I can still be progressive in. And if push came to shove, I can still eventually, if I change that route to become a librarian, I could always fall back on my artwork also.
So life for you has been a lot of chess, if you will.
Yeah.
Chess, not checkers.
Yes. So there's always a plan behind. There's always a reason why I do what I do. So there's a plan behind it, and I always have. If something is not working this way, I can deviate and go another way.
Okay. So you're in the program. You're getting your bachelor's degree. So at what point in any of this did it actually hit you that library science is it? Library science is going to be the thing that I do.
Well, like I said, that hit me before I even finished my bachelor's degree, because I knew that was my end goal. So being in that environment, working with the folks that I was working with, getting that tutelage from my library manager and one of the few Black librarians that was working in the county. I knew that's what I wanted to be and who I wanted to be. So that was probably after me working as a library assistant, maybe the first 2-3 years. That's when I knew that's what I wanted to do.
All right. So it wasn't I think I could do this. It was I'm going to do this. This is what I'm doing.
Yes, pretty much. And what even spurred me to do it quicker was I found out that there was a program where I can possibly get a scholarship to go to library school. So what it's called is, back in the early 2000s, Laura Bush, George Bush's wife, she created a scholarship program at the Institute for Museum and Library Services. And it's called the Laura Bush 2000 20th Century Librarian Grant Program. So their main focus was to bring librarians of color into the field. So with this scholarship opportunity, it took care of all your tuition, any fees, any books. It actually paid you a stipend, and it also gave you the opportunity to see librarianship in a different way. We would take different trips to different places. We went to different conferences and different types of libraries. So we were able to see librarianship full circle. So when I had the opportunity to apply for this grant opportunity, this scholarship, I did the first year and I did not get in. But I tried it again the second year and I was able to get in. So at North Carolina Central, university. It was called the Diversity Scholars Program. And it was me and 9 other cohort members that went through the program together as diversity scholars. And we were able to take advantage of all those opportunities. We had to work harder. That was one of the stipulations, because when you go to library school, you have to get 36 hours of credits in order to graduate. We had to get 48. So we actually had to work harder than any of our counterparts that were in library school and still graduate at the same time. But we had to do 12 extra credits of classwork in order to do it.
So in hindsight, were those 12 extra credits that you had to get, were they, in your opinion, in hindsight, a waste of time? Or do you think they made you? No,
they were very beneficial, because some of that extra credit work was in public administration. So it allowed us to get coursework in library science and coursework in public administration. And that was something that if you have a regular MLS degree, you don't get. So we had that added push, or that added oomph when it came to our credentials once we graduated.
So hard work does pay off, it sounds like you're saying.
Yeah, yes, definitely.
So
that was not easy also, but yeah, we all at the same time we finished, we all graduated at the same time, we all did really well. So yeah, and then we also became a close-knit group of individuals at that time too. So
are you still in touch with any of them?
Yes. Yep, I am.
Good. So what does just really quickly, and I won't say most people, but I don't fully know, in terms of a librarian, like what most people know, the extent of most people's knowledge of librarians is they collect books and tell you to shh. What does a librarian do? What does your job entail?
No, that is not what a librarian in general does, or a 20th century librarian. So if you were to go in and if you look at librarianship, there's a number of different areas that you could actually look at. So we have librarians that work in the public library, which is what I do myself. We have librarians that work in academic libraries, so for colleges and universities, and I actually spent some time there too. We have librarians that work in public schools. I spent some time there too. And we have librarians that work in special libraries. So if you look at like the Library of Congress, you look at the Smithsonian, those are librarians that work there, that those are considered special libraries. So there's a couple of different paths that you can take in the field of librarianship. That's one thing. And then we as a field, we have to really understand how things are indexed, how things are cataloged. So when you go up to a librarian, you say, hey, can you find me a book on so-and-so? They know exactly where to go. We understand the Dewey Decimal System, which is something that we're actually looking at in a different way now, because we understand when we talk about white supremacy and we talk about racism, that the Dewey Decimal System is actually racist. Yeah. And a lot of people don't really understand the depths of how it's put together. And when you talk about subject headings, it's something that they're looking at now to kind of maybe make changes to. But we have to understand that when it comes to when we say indexing and making sure that items are put in the correct subject heading. It's a lot. It's very technical, but then we look at librarianship on the other end as providing information to individuals. So understanding where to get information from, understanding how to decipher information, and not just going to a website and saying this is credible information. Understanding how to determine what's credible and what's not. You know that we don't just do a wiki search and use that as something to reference on a paper. So just understanding the nuances of information, how to decipher information, and giving people correct information is really what librarians do. But then we look at that outreach piece, which is really big. Bringing communities into libraries and providing them with resources. Those are things that are really, really prevalent with what we do as librarians on a daily basis.
Okay. So, and thank you for that. But you just definitely opened the door. How is the Dewey Decimal System racist?
Okay, I can give you one example when it comes to when we look at religion and the Dewey Decimal System. So Christianity, if you look at numbers, the way the Dewey Decimal System is formatted, the religion section is in the 200s. Christianity takes up the 200s from 200 to 290. Everything from 200 to 290 is Christianity. The rest of the religions is in that last 0.1%. So right there, that's where it really shows how Dewey focused on Christianity, white Christianity, as a subject heading and kind of minimize any other type of religion.
So, you know me, and I enjoy a decent debate / argument. If Dewey, there was no other stuff for me to. It just so happened to be more Christian text than anything else. What do you want me to do?
And no, but just because there was all the Christian text here in this country, that doesn't mean that was the only Christian text. There was, and of course, we know the largest world religion is Islam. So just think about that in context to what they allow for religion in the 200s in Christianity versus what's allowed with Islam, Buddhism. We can think about there's other religions. I can't think of them right now, but just if you think about that in general, the size of your collection for those would be very minuscule compared to what Christianity would show you.
Touche. Checkmate.
So, yes.
So now you're actually kind of leading into something that I'm just personally curious about. So libraries have become a lot more controversial than I remember them ever being in life.
Yes.
What is all of the controversy and what's all the controversy surrounding libraries now?
Because libraries are a place where people can be free thinkers, and what's going on in the climate that we have right now, they don't want free thinkers. So now we have where books are being or trying to be banned. Books on Black history, they're a target, and then books on that talk about the LGBTQIA experience are being targeted. So this is what we consider we're part of these culture wars now. When you have individuals that want to dictate what everybody can read, that's an issue. Making sure, and as librarians, we have to make sure that people understand that the freedom to read is a right. The freedom for you to choose what you want to read or you want your child to read. and making sure that anybody else cannot control that or push their own agenda or their own narrative on what you allow your children or yourself to read is where we're kind of drawing that line, and having people to understand that this society has to be a society of free thinkers. So people have to be able to make their own decision, and one group of people should not be able to make decisions for an entire group of people.
So the controversy, so your role, I would imagine, over the last few years has shifted and is shifting more and more into a political role, if you will.
I mean, I have to field phone calls from our community or people that visit our location or our libraries and answer questions about why a certain book is there, that them feeling that it shouldn't be there, and then have to reiterate to them and let them understand that I get what you're saying, but again, we are here to provide information to our entire community. It is up to you to pick and choose what you want your child to read, but you cannot dictate that for what somebody else or somebody else's child. And it's been a ongoing conversation. It's been an ongoing conversation in the field of librarianship. And we have an organization called ALA, is our association of the American Library Association. And they're on the forefront of kind of fighting for librarians and making sure that they can still hold up to those core values that we have as librarians.
So as far as the controversy, I know that there's controversy in general surrounding libraries. Describe a personal controversy you've experienced, had to deal with in the library.
The library system that I'm currently working in, we had some issues a couple of years ago where we had a book that was challenged by one of the community members, and instead of us going through a process to make sure that the book had fair representation before it was pulled, the book was pulled. So from there, it was leaked to the news. It was in the press. So we kind of spent some time making sure that our systems were in place, that when we did get a challenge, that we went through a process. At that point, we did not have a formal process that worked. So I was actually part of a group of people that came together to create a process to make sure that if a book was challenged, that there was a well spelled out process for it to go through to make sure that we did everything we needed to do on our end, and did our due diligence to say, hey, this book probably needs to be pulled, or this book should stay. And it's very hard from now dealing with this process that we put in place for a book to be challenged and removed from our library system. So we learned a lot during that process, and then understanding that us really getting our library system to a point where we look at DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, in a different way was another thing that came out of that experience.
So your mission, and I know we've discussed it offline, but your mission is to increase the presence of the black and brown people in library science. So I'll just play devil's advocate here. So the library system has been working for centuries with minimal numbers of black and brown librarians. What is why is attracting more diversity into the library system or the librarianship field so important if it's been functioning for years without them?
Okay, so one of the things you have to understand is, as a society in this country, if you look at statistically, we are becoming more diverse. So if you look at by the year of 2040, I think it's 2045, we will be they call it a majority minority, but we will have more people of color in the United States than we have white people. So if you look at the demographics and the demographic shift, understanding and that was, one of the things we talk about all the time, our library staff, librarianship needs to reflect the community that the librarians work in. So if we have a African American community, there should be African American librarians in the library. When we look at percentages, like for instance, if I look at Wake County is 43% people of color. So by default, 43% of our library staff should be people of color. That way, when people come and see our libraries, they will see themselves. And that's the most important thing. When people come into those doors of that library, they should feel comfortable, and they should be able to see themselves behind the desk, in the stacks, and know that they then too are welcome into that space. So that is the most important thing to me, to making sure that my staff reflects my population of patrons that come into the library.
Well put. So do you think, just describe the impact that I guess you kind of did, the impact that an increase in Black and brown presence would have. But
I get it every day with feedback from my patrons that come in. When you see, and it's just inherent, when you see somebody that looks like you feel more comfortable. I don't care what space you go into. When you see somebody that looks like you, it makes you say, oh man, I can go talk to this person. And they will probably understand me more than maybe this person will. So having that understanding and allowing people to feel that comfort when they do walk into the space, that's really key.
Okay. So why do you think that in the information age, if you will, why do you think that there are so few Black and brown people in the library system now, if the opportunities are there?
Well, one of the reasons why is, when I talked about how I came into my MLS program, I received a scholarship. I think that if I had not received that scholarship, it would have been probably 10 times harder for me to achieve that MLS. So one of the main reasons why is finance. Financially, getting a MLS degree, it's $20,000 to $30,000 a year, which is, not a year, but for the program, in total. So it's a 2-year program. So you're spending $20,000 to $30,000 to receive that degree. So that's a hardship on a lot of people if they have to go the route of either paying for it themselves or taking out loans. That's the first thing. The second thing is just being introduced to the profession. So a lot of Black and brown folks are not introduced to the profession. So as a librarian, we have to make sure that we advocate into those communities, to individuals that, hey, they don't even see themselves as librarians, but advocate and say, hey, this is something that you could do. So that's the second thing that's missing. And then really the third thing is and I'll put it, sorry. The third thing is just in making sure that people understand what we do. So having an excitement for the profession. So with those three things, I think if we can continue to push, we will bring and attract more folks of color into the profession.
So do you have like I've read estimates that there are roughly about 128,000 librarians in the country. Does that sound right? But I've also read that anywhere between 4.4 and I believe 7.8% of them are black. My question is, what quantitative or qualitative measures or metrics or matrices would you use to determine the success of the DEI committee?
We measure staffing on a yearly basis. So we started looking at what our staff was composed of before, even before we created our DEI committee. And then each year we check to see what kind of progress we made. One of the things that we look at is we look at staffing overall, but one of the things that I wanted to kind of focus on is our professional librarian staffing, and the success of bringing more people of color within that professional realm. Because when it comes to staffing as library assistants, and library pages and library aides, we have more diversity. Because those are the professions where those are the positions that they don't need a MLS degree to be able to have. So taking it a step further and looking at the MLS degreed folks that work in our library system is where we're trying to really focus on. And looking at our hiring practices is really the main way to do that. Making sure that we put our announcements out to different venues, especially venues where we have associations with people of color. Making sure that we look at the person's whole experience and not just where they are right now. I think that's another way that we could bring more diverse folks into the field. And then one of the things that we're also trying to do is create a program within our library system where we can actually help defer some of the payments or some of the financial burden for getting an MLS degree with our staffing. So those are the things we'll look at, and it's something that we just started 2 years ago. And then as the years go by, we made a little progress, but I think once we continue and we continue to measure from there, we'll make better progress from that.
So what's the percentage, what's the thing? So in other words, if blank happens, then I would consider the DEI a success. Fill in that blank.
You know what? I can't fill in that blank. And the reason why is because as we go through this journey, we focus on a number of different things. When I look at our DEI committee, we look at it in three areas. So we look at it as our internal focus, our external focus, and our big picture focus. So internally, we look at our staffing. We look at our hiring, our retention practices. We also look at staff development internally. External, we look at what we offer our patrons on the outside. So we look at our programs, we look at our outreach, we look at our collection, and we making sure that those areas are diverse. And then when we look at big picture, we're looking at equity when it comes to how each library is being taken care of. Making sure that everybody is receiving a level of service that they should, as far as your lawn service, your maintenance, making sure that every facility, the furniture is nice, and not one facility has nice furniture and another one has trashy furniture. So we also look at the strategic planning, and we look at our vendors and who are we working with. So it's a big undertaking, and understanding that in 2, 3, 4 years, it's going to take a little time before we can actually see some wins. We have seen some wins, but I don't think they're enough to measure if it's successful or not right now. So if we look at all of those areas, and in 4 years, we can say there's been a shift, there's been a change, then that's when I can say we've been successful.
So in other words, the DEI is just way too multifaceted to be able to fill in a blank.
Nothing is going to happen in a year. Not to where you can really measure that something made a change that you instituted, because it takes a long time. And that's one thing that I did learn throughout this process, that in order to you want quick wins, but in order to make lasting, sustainable change, it takes time. Unfortunately, that is how things are. When something has been so entrenched and instilled in a system, trying to dismantle it takes some patience. It takes some strategic thinking, and it takes time for it to kind of morph into something different.
Okay. So let me just throw it in reverse really quickly. So in terms of the controversy, it sounds like almost, is it a censorship issue? And I guess they're not saying they can't write the book. What they're saying is they just don't want it publicly available. So it wouldn't be. It's really a suppression issue, a suppression of information issue.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly what it is.
What is the vested interest you think those that are trying to suppress the information, what vested interest do they have in doing so?
You know what? I can't even answer that question, because it's all, to me, kind of surrounded by this political agenda, which is then entrenched with this world agenda, or this country agenda. And it's so multifaceted, and people, they're coming from a number of different directions when it comes to the complaints and so forth and so on. So I can't really say where it's coming from, but I can say where it's coming from, put it that way.
No, understood.
Yes.
What is the reason you think for it? Wherever it's coming from, what is the reason?
Now,
and bonus question, the book, I don't know if you can say or cannot for any number of reasons, but what types of books do you see that type of political pressure from?
I can definitely name a couple of titles. So one of the titles is called Lawn Boy. We have some board book titles called The Skin I'm In and Anti-Racist Baby, and Genderqueer. So just thinking about when I kind of focused on Black studies or Black focused and LGBTQIA focused titles. I have my own personal reason why I know this is happening. There's it's and if you look at politics and you look at how everything shapes out in these state houses and the different laws and the attack on DEI and the attack on LGBTQ IA rights, and understand where it's actually being birthed. My opinion in what I spoke about earlier is about the population shift that we're dealing with, that's coming soon, and I think there's a fear in certain individuals within the society that things will change for them versus what has always been what we call a white supremacist thought process. I think they're afraid of that shift and what it will mean for them in the next 50 years. So they are trying to put things in place in order to kind of combat that. That's my own personal opinion.
And I'm sure that there are many that would agree with you.
Yes.
I definitely think, in my own personal opinion, I think it has everything to do with a power balance, and I think it has everything to do with a population shift in terms of the numbers of white people as opposed to black and brown. And I think with that comes certain fears, like you said, to your point. And I think that also speaks volumes as to how important the information is.
Yeah.
And
that's why there's the attack on libraries and librarians, because they know the importance of the information, or the gatekeepers of this information are to our society. So that's why.
And so do you think, I mean, because like you said, that's such a, well, you didn't say it, I said it, that's such a political agenda.
I think it's beyond politics. I think politics is driving, but I don't think it's not a political agenda. It's a world agenda. I mean, that's really what it is. You know, that's being fueled in this country, but it's not just a political agenda. It's a way of life agenda, and that's beyond politics.
But do you think that, like, in terms of, like, do you think people are well enough informed to, like, make their own minds up with regards to, I don't want this book in here? Or do you think that most people just kind of go with the flow, and if there's a political flow, most people just go with it? So in other words, like, if you're let's just say, for argument's sake, for a conservative Republican, and the conservative Republican says, we need these books out of the library, we need these books out of schools, do you think most people are doing an analysis like, well, now you're getting into suppression of information? Or do you think they just say, Governor such and such said this, and I agree with, like, I think most people just go with it, and I don't think people do a lot of analysis, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. People don't really become a part of something until it affects them personally. And that's when people really become a part of something, when either one way or the other, one side or the other, when it affects them personally, as a whole. You know, that's where I think it comes from. If you like, for instance, if you're a parent and your child has just come out as being gay, and you totally disagree with that, then now you're pushing an agenda on one side because of how you feel about what had happened personally to you, and then vice versa. So that's when people get on the side of things, when they have that personal connection.
That's interesting. I I don't know. I just think people I just don't think that the people, and obviously could be wrong.
Well, and then when they don't have that personal connection, that's when they say, "Hey, this is what it is," because there's no connection one way or the other. Then they just go with the flow. But if they have a personal connection, then that's when you're going to figure out what side of the line that they're going to fall on.
I'm just curious. So the books that were banned, or the books that not banned, but the books that were the subject of the controversy, were they all written by Black authors by chance?
Some of them were, not all of them, but yes, some were.
So the author had there was no race. The race of the author had no bearing. It's more of the content, the information that people don't want disseminated.
I think. I don't know. It just depends on the if we talk about these individual books that I mentioned, I think the race of the author did have a bearing on the and the content. So it was both. But I think that has something to do with it also, because you think about, especially when you talk about Black history trying to be whitewashed, where they're trying to replace the word slave and put indentured servant. I mean, so those those types of things are done intentionally because of the content or the person writing about it. So it goes both ways.
Okay, so the steps that so you described all the steps that you're taking. What's kind of new? Or does the DEI have any kind of new plans, new agendas, or new undertakings to further what you're looking to do?
We're going into a process where we're bringing on new members, and then we'll kind of look at what we're going to focus on for the next 2 years. Some of the things that we've focused on the last 2 years, we'll revisit those things, making sure that we kind of continue pushing for things that we haven't really had any movement on. And then we'll look at maybe focusing on some things that are even a little bit different. One of the things we've talked about is, and that we haven't really focused too much on, is our PR, how we advertise, who we advertise to, and how we push information out about our library system and into the community, and what communities get that information. So we'll look at some things, continue to push for some things that we want to see done, and then also look at some new things that we haven't really explored.
All right. So with that, I just want to first and foremost, again, thank you for being here. Thank you for your time, your energy, and certainly wish you, in your personal and professional, and the DEI continued success. All the best and continued success.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. But okay.
But before we actually let you go, there is so we're now entering into the black box segment of the show.
Okay.
So this is a segment where we ask each guest to make a deposit of some jewel or some insight or wisdom, suggestion or piece of advice to the Black community as a whole, or some segment of it. So your deposit.
My deposit would be to make sure that you pass whatever knowledge you have on to the next generation, and know when to step back and allow those younger, those with more energy, those with a different thought process, take the front seat. Know when to step back and continue to mentor. Those are my jewels. So it's always very important that we continue to each one teach one and let the reins go, and allow for that younger generation to do the same.
Beautiful. As expected. Beautiful. Thank you again for everything. And again, all the best and continued success.
Well, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation. And if you ever think about becoming a librarian, don't second guess it. Go for it. Spend some time at your library. Talk to the librarians and see if this is something that you would love to do, because we need more Black and brown faces in our libraries.
Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Valerie Pierce.
Bye-bye.
Peace. And welcome to the He Didn't Believe You Either segment of the program. So, given all the insight that Miss Valerie Pierce just offered with regards to library science, we wanted to shine a light on another gentleman who did not believe the false negative narrative nor the stereotypes and negative images of Black people. His name was Mr. Edward Christopher Williams. He was the first professionally Black trained librarian in the United States. He attended Western Reserve University in Cleveland, where he became an assistant librarian and eventually worked his way up to become the university librarian in 1898. While employed there, he doubled the library's collection and helped to form its library school. He was the first Black man to join the American Library Association. He earned his master's degree in library science from New York State Library School in Albany, New York. After years of hard work and dedication, he became a university librarian at Howard University, a historically Black college and university in Washington, D.C., where he led a library training class and taught German. He passed away in 1929 while working on his Ph.D. at Columbia University. Peace to Mr. Edward Christopher Williams, because he didn't believe you either. Peace.
Thanks for listening to the We Don't Believe You podcast with your host, Brian McCoy. We hope you feel enlightened and empowered by our show. Please visit our YouTube channel at We Don't Believe You and our socials at We Don't Believe You on Facebook and Nah Don't Believe You on Twitter X. Please subscribe and share our podcast. Peace.